Hey guys, welcome to week 6 lecture. This week we're going to talk about quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing sources because in project 3, which is an argument essay, we're going to be using 4 sources in our essay. Okay, so first I just want to mention that these aren't necessarily rules because there are exceptions to the rules. So we should call them conventions of writing rhetorical. So let's get started. So first question we have to ask ourselves is, should I summarize or should I paraphrase? So summary and paraphrase, both are information that you explain in your own words, but which you got from another source. So for a summary, this would be done with a whole or a longer work, mentioning just the main points and condensing the information. So maybe it's 5 pages and you condense it down to a paragraph. Or maybe it's a paragraph and you condense it down to a couple sentences. A paraphrase is done with a specific short passage or part of a work, and you would explain one specific point in your own words, but you wouldn't need to condense. So both are done in your own words. So how to correctly summarize or paraphrase. So each time you use a source in your essay, you want to frame the source. And we can use something that we call the source sandwich. So first you would start with an introduction where you would introduce the quote, and here's an example. According to English instructor Catherine Zalata-Polsky, and then in APA format you'd put the date there, and then you would add the source material. So here I just put a sentence. We must frame the source by both introducing it in our own words and explaining what it means for our point. Then after you put the material that you find in your source, then you explain it. So I give an example here. Zalata-Polsky contended that sources must be explained by the writer in order to help the audience make sense of them. So each time you would introduce your quote or paraphrase or summary, then you would put the source there right after that. Then you would explain how it fit into your paper or how it supports your thesis statement, why it's there. You got to guide the reader through your essay. Okay, so another way to correctly summarize or paraphrase is to make sure when you introduce the quote, you use an accurate signal verb. So I give some examples here. Zalata-Polsky argues, Zalata-Polsky states, Zalata-Polsky observes. So you want to say the author's name and then a verb and then go into the paraphrase or summary. Okay, moving on, we're going to talk about how to correctly use quotations. So again, just like a summary or a paraphrase, you would frame the source using our source sandwich. So again, you would introduce your quote. So again, according to English instructor Catherine Zalata-Polsky, 2021. And then we would put our quotation here. So quotations are like orphans. That's our example. So there's quotation marks around it, and your quote is inside the quotation marks. And then we never just leave a quote, we explain. So as we move through our paragraph, we would develop that by explaining what the quote means or why we placed it there. So for example, here I put, Zalata-Polsky means that quotes are out of context and the writer must place them in context to make sense of them. So you would never want to begin or end a body paragraph with a quote. A quote would go in the middle. You would frame it. Okay, we want to avoid using a lot of quotes. So this is your essay and we want it to be in your words. So you don't want to use a lot of quotes. Only use a quote if you can't say it better yourself. You need to show the original source's words that were used. Otherwise, it is better to paraphrase or summarize. Okay, how to correctly use quotations, integrating the quote. So when integrating a quote, you want to make the introduction fit grammatically with the quote so that it reads as part of the sentence and that it's grammatically correct. So when introducing a quotation, you want to place a comma at the end of the introductory clause. So an example here, we've got Zalatoppolsky, and then the date 2021 states, comma, and then we have our quotation. We must use quotes sparingly. And then, of course, we would go on and explain that in our paragraph. And then never refer to a quote as a quote in your essay. So I wanted to make sure we don't accidentally do that. So we would never want to say something like, according to a quote by Zalatoppolsky. You know, we know it's a quote. So you just want to say, according to Zalatoppolsky. So don't use the word quote in your signal phrase when you're making your source sandwich. And then here, how to correctly use quotations and summaries and paraphrases. Make sure the name or word in the in-text citation matches the first word of the reference page citation. So for this essay, we're going to have a reference page because we're going to be using 4 sources that we find from the library database. So we want to make sure when we have our in-text citation, so here we're using an example, Smith 2019, I should be able to go to your reference page and I should find an entry that starts with the word Smith, the name Smith, on the reference page. Every once in a while, you'll find a source that might not have an author's name, so I'm going to give an example here. Maybe we just have the title. And for the title here, classical mythology. So I should find your reference page. I should quickly be able to find classical mythology. It should start with that. So you want to make sure all of your in-text citations are also listed on your reference page and that they match. So that's very important. So you'll want to go through that when you revise your essay before you turn in your final draft of Project 3. So go ahead and take the quiz. That's all I have for this week's lecture. Don't worry too much about your drafts and the quotations in. You know, I would start just doing your essay in your own words and then adding sources as you find them. And also just reach out if you have any questions.